In this video, we're going to talk about the one mindset shift that really unlocked success for me. Let's talk about privilege. I used to think that privilege was the most unfair thing ever, and that without it, there would be no way that I would ever be successful. It must have been undergrad. I was applying for lab positions and for some jobs, and I realized that a lot of my peers had resumes that were, in a word, stacked. They had participated in all of these activities since childhood while I was out playing basketball with friends and messing around with Legos. Not only that, but the connections that their families had afforded them all sorts of different opportunities that I didn't feel were available to me. In spite of myself, I started to feel really bitter. How could I possibly succeed in a world where all of my peers were essentially being groomed for success? Eventually, I decided to stop feeling so sorry for myself and to try to do something about it. The problem was that I wasn't really sure where to start. It was like I was trying to play a game, but the rulebook had been hidden from me. I found the answer, and no surprise this time, a book. Outliers by Malcom Gladwell. In this book, Malcom Gladwell breaks down the stories of very successful people and pieces together some of the common factors that they have. One thing that made all of these people successful was less what they knew and more who. So it seemed like this was the answer. I just had to meet some people, build some relationships, make some connections, and my success would be guaranteed, right? Well, a little bit easier said than done. So you see that guy right there? That's me at your average party. I'm an introvert, and I find it difficult to talk to strangers at a party, much less build relationships with professionals to accelerate my career. So once again, I felt a little bit stuck, and the answer this time came from a surprising place. My least favorite course in undergrad was, like many of you, math. It didn't make sense to me, and a couple of days before the midterm, I was convinced that I was going to fail. Nothing was adding up in my head. And at this point, I was getting desperate. I was super reluctant, but I plucked up the courage to go to my professor's office hours. And it was here that I got an answer to both of my questions. After talking about math and getting a better grasp on the material that I needed to know, we just started chatting about life. And I came out of that meeting feeling fantastic. This simple conversation with my prof taught me that making relationships didn't have to be some fancy thing that only happens at cocktail parties. It was also completely acceptable to meet one-on-one and try to foster a more meaningful connection. So I continued. I was in university, so I reached out to all of the smart, interesting people that I can find and just asked them to chat. And it actually started to work. These conversations and relationships led to scholarships, to publications, to lab positions, and admission. So this was it. This is the answer, right? This is how a shy, unprivileged Korean boy gets to mega success. Well, not quite. I'm still figuring things out, but there are a few key points that we can take away from this. Point number one is not to confuse quantity for quality. I think that the word networking has an interesting connotation. We picture all of these greasy people at a cocktail party getting to know each other for the sake of building connections to accelerate their career. I think that people are really good bullshit detectors. And so approaching someone for the sole purpose of getting their email address so that they can hook you up with job offers is not necessarily going to work out. Instead, I think it's more important to actually build meaningful connections with people. People that I actually respect, that I genuinely find interesting. And so if that conversation leads to some sort of an opportunity down the road, then great. But if not, we've still earned something valuable from that interaction. And so it's more meaningful, I think, to have a tighter knit network of fewer individuals than a vast one of people that you don't really know and don't really care about. Here's number two. Meeting people is a great way to be introduced to new opportunities and to get our foot in the door. This doesn't mean that we're free from the obligation of actually walking through the door. If this metaphor is getting too complicated, I mean that connections don't actually replace hard work. When opportunities are given to us, it's our job to actually work at them and to make something out of them. Just meeting and talking to people isn't going to accomplish anything by itself. Here's takeaway number three, and this one I think is the most important. I used to be hyper fixated on what other people had that I did not, like having rich parents or a ton of connections. I realized that I was actually underappreciating all of the important lessons that I had learned in my childhood from my parents. Everybody has competitive, unfair advantages, whether you're privileged or not. And I guess it's our job to figure out what those are and to exploit them accordingly. It can be tough and it can feel really unfair not having success given to us on a silver platter. But on the other hand, how boring would that be? I think that with all of the resources that I've been given and the right attitude, I can figure things out. And So can you. Thanks for watching.